mentioned the fear. I know a lot of women talk about when treatment ends, it's a very scary time. They're being followed really closely. They have a good relationship with the doctor that they see regularly. And then they get home and they're not being watched as carefully, and it becomes very scary.
Yeah, I mean, that really surprised me because Marcia felt exactly like that. It's like she was seeing these great docs every couple of days, every week or so, and it was very reassuring and very comforting to her. And then all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but treatment ends, and the doctors are, well, see you in 3 months, see you in 6 months, see you in a year. And for the caregiver, you have to really understand that state of mind, that it's not always a celebration that you're done and you're moving forward. There is that sort of feeling like, wow, I was under this great care and supervision, and all of a sudden I'm not. And it's a scary place to be.
Are men as fearful, or are they
I think it runs
concerned?
all over the map. I mean, what I found out about Marcia and me is that I'm really good at denial, and she's really good at, I would say she's a bit of a pessimist. She would say she's a realist. But different people react in different ways, and I try to put it out of my mind, and sometimes she just worries more than I do. And what I understood is that you have to really be there and listen to your wife and take those worries seriously. You can't just say, oh, no worries now because everything's done. And the other problem is that the whole world wants you to put it all behind you. Like, people at work and friends and family often think that when cancer treatment ends, everything's fine and you're done and there's no more worries and you're cured. And anyone who's lived through cancer knows that there's always possibilities of return of cancer, and it's a different frame of mind. And it doesn't help when everybody says to you, oh, don't worry about it at all, because it's human nature to worry. The book doesn't close. And in my book, when I interviewed a lot of couples about cancer, one woman said to me that her husband said after she finished treatment, well, that's over with now. And she just exploded at him, and she blew up because she said, you know what, it's not over. I have to live with this for the rest of my life, and the side effects of the treatment and the fear that cancer could recur. And that's one of the things that I had to come to understand too, that this wasn't the end of cancer, that there's this whole, that for the rest of your life you're going to be thinking about it one way or the other, worrying about possible recurrence during checkups and such, and even when someone in the news is diagnosed with cancer, it just kind of throws you back sometimes to where you were, and that's part of your identity as a couple now, that you have this new worry to cope with. The other thing that's really interesting is sort of all the questions about fear, like how do you cope with all these fears of the unknown, because there are a lot of fears that linger after cancer treatment. And I know it was really hard for Marcia, again, because I'm a practiced denier. I was able to maybe put some of these feelings down, and also it's her body and her life, and I worry about her and want her to be healthy and want us to live a long time together, but it's just different. I'm not the patient, and I'm not the one facing this disease within my own body. And she talked to one of her doctors about all these feelings she was having after treatment ended, and she was saying, will I have scans every week and visits all the time? And the doctor that she was seeing felt that constant scans would reveal false positives and things that weren't really cancer, but would create all this worry. And he believes that the series of every couple of months seeing a different doctor was a good way to keep a handle on things without becoming obsessed by it. And he gave us some really good advice that I think helps you find the good things after treatment ends. He said, you can always worry about recurrences after cancer treatment, and if you don't have a recurrence, you've wasted all that time worrying. Even if you do have a recurrence, you still wasted all that time worrying when you could have been enjoying your life and enjoying each other. And we just try to live by those words. I think it was a very simple and profound thing that he said to us, that don't let yourself become a prisoner of your fears. And if you can move past that, then you really do have a new normal that's kind of a nice place to be.
Can you talk a little bit about resentment, and are men resentful at the cancer or at their wives, or the fact that their life is taking life of its own?
I've met guys that had all those kinds of feelings, and I think in a way it gets back to your marriage vows. It's like for better or for worse, and you sort of don't want to have cancer come into your life, and you don't want to have to deal with it, but there it is sometimes, and you're stuck with it. And I think that if you feel resentment, the question is, how do you express that resentment? And if you feel it towards your spouse, then that's going to be not very helpful for anybody or for your marriage. And the guys who sort of channel their resentment, I think, through just getting out of the house and screaming, or a lot of guys I met cried in the car, which sort of have all this anger and resentment inside, and how do you express it? And I remember one day I was driving around and listening to Ray Charles on the radio, and all of a sudden I heard these weird noises in the car, and it was me crying, and I thought, wow, I've really gone mad. And I didn't dare tell my wife because I didn't want to go home to someone who'd been diagnosed with cancer a few weeks ago and say, oh, honey, guess what? I had a little breakdown in the car. So I just kind of kept those feelings inside. And when I interviewed guys for the book, I met a lot of guys who cried in the car. And I think, and they said to me, you know what? It helped me feel better. It's like you do have this whole mixed master of emotions whirling inside, and it's resentment and anger and fear and uncertainty. And sometimes just like letting it all out and crying or screaming at the windshield in your car while you're driving to work, it might be a little bit crazy if you told your regular friends about it, but it is a way of kind of letting those emotions out. And that's one of the things I really learned from Marcia, I think, because she was very good at expressing what she was feeling, and I tended to hold things inside sometimes. And if you let it out, then it's out and you can deal with it. And if you keep it bottled up inside, then it's just going to eat away at you. And it's just important to find someone to talk to, whether sometimes you can talk to your wife for sure, sometimes your wife might need her space to deal with cancer, and you might have to find a really good friend or a support group, or even you see a mental health worker, a therapist, or someone to just kind of help you sort out those emotions. But keeping them inside is just never going to help. Although you can keep them inside for a little while sometimes, and sometimes they just go away, and then it's like, oh, well, that wasn't a really big problem. That was just a sort of an anger of the moment that you do see. You sort of learn what's really real and critical, and sometimes you'll just be angry about something and it'll pass, and you go, okay, well, that's okay. It sort of went away on its own.
I think you bring up a good point that the fear gets better,
Yeah.
and it just takes time. Would you
Yeah.
say that after a while, every little bump or concern, you don't immediately think that your wife is having a recurrence or a metastases, or do you think that is there something that you did to get to that point?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I don't think we'll ever be at that point in a way, because we've had we've had a couple of times when something happened with a scan that was inconclusive, or they discovered Marcia was having trouble with her hip, and they discovered some kind of a mass in her hip, and they didn't know if it was benign or not. And we both swore that we wouldn't let cancer make us lose sleep anymore, but you know what, we both lost sleep, and we both swore we'd always be honest with each other, and I think we both kept these scary thoughts inside, like, oh my God, this is really it this time, and we're back in the cancer situation. And fortunately, they were all false alarms, but it's hard to let go of it. And you can, I think when your day-to-day life, you're right, sort of things kind of fade away, but there can be that moment, or if someone famous passes away from cancer, it can bring it all back, or if you hear of a friend who's been diagnosed. So I think it's just something that you're living with. It's part of who you are as a couple. And that's not a bad thing. I talked to a professor who'd done a study on post-traumatic stress, sort of what happens after couples go through these traumatic experiences like dealing with cancer. And the couples that kind of didn't talk about it and didn't think about it couldn't move forward. And the couples who really were able to talk about it with each other and think about what did it mean and what does life mean to me and what's important to me, those are the people who could grow from the experience and make changes in their life. The other thing that's good for guys is to be a little bit selfish. I mean, not in a bad way, but during treatment and after treatment, it's like you have to keep yourself together and be there for your family and for your kids and for your wife. And if you become a martyr and give up everything that you like doing, you're just going to burn out. And I think that that's a real danger, that as a caregiver, you can just suffer from great fatigue as well. And it's important to make time for yourself when you can, to do things that give you some sense of energy and recharge. And I would, I guess I'm a little bit selfish, so I wanted to do the things I like doing, whether it was watching a goofy TV show or going for a jog or hanging out with friends. And I think that what I would end up doing is just asking Marcia, and if she were okay with it, then she'd say, yeah, go ahead, go out for a bike ride, go out for a run. Some women told me that they would call their husband's friends secretly and say, get him out of the house, take him to a bar to hang out with, for a night out. And those things are tremendously helpful, because you don't want to feel like you've lost everything. And as a guy going through this, you're carrying so much more than you've ever carried before. You've got your job, you've got your family responsibilities, and now you've got your wife or girlfriend has cancer, and you're going with her to doctor's appointments, and you're worrying about her health, and you're picking up things at home that she would have done because now she can't, since she's not feeling as great because of treatment. So it is a really tough place to be, and making some time for yourself to kind of charge back up your energy batteries is a good, good tactic.